G'day everyone, it's JP and I'm back with another episode of Practical Powerlifting. I'm doing another solo episode because it's just easier. I've had trouble getting guests, not having trouble getting guests in terms of reaching out and getting rejections, although that may be the case. But more so, it's just time consuming. And I like doing the solo episodes, they've been fun. Today's episode, I'm going to get straight into it, is titled, as you can see, What Weight Class is Right for You? And this is a natural question that a lot of lifters find themselves asking when they are approaching their first powerlifting meet specifically, but even long before they even compete. They're already thinking about it. They're already looking at the weight classes and kind of mentally mapping where they might end up. And even lifters that have been lifting for a long time and been competing for a long time still might not be sure which weight class might be right for them. So today I want to delve into this topic and kind of share my perspective as someone who's been around for so long, has competed across multiple weight classes, has gone up, has gone down, and where I would encourage you to think about putting yourself. Many years ago, the logic and the wisdom was that bigger people lift more weights, heavier, denser people lift more weights, and are more competitive. And so it was well understood and well accepted that in order to be as competitive a powerlifter as you want to be, you have to be wide and heavy relative to your height. So for example, a male of my size, 160 centimeters, so on the relatively short end of the spectrum in the general population, would want to be competing in the 83 kilo class, which is like the middle weight class, right? One of the middle weight classes. And it was very rare to see competitive lifters being tall and lanky. And so, yeah, a lot of the messaging and a lot of the recommendations was to go up in a weight class. However, the reason that I bring up this topic today is because I think in more recent years, we've actually seen a trend the other way a little bit, where lifters are competing in lighter weight classes, and we're seeing very competitive lifters, not as thick and stocky as we may have once seen. Now, of course, there are many examples of lifters that are still on that, still have that shape, being relatively short and relatively heavy. But there are numerous examples of surprisingly tall lifters who are competing at a very high level. So I'll give you a couple just off the top of my head to get us started. And these are lifters that you're probably familiar with. So from the USA, you have Joe Borenstein, 83 kilo lifter, relatively tall. I can't give you the exact stats, unfortunately. Another one that comes to mind from New Zealand, Tim Monaghardi, was previously lifting in the 83 kilo class, went down to the 74 kilo class and fought for a world championship, nearly winning. I think he came equal first, top three or equal that year. Him, Taylor Atwood, and Karl Johansson from Sweden. And the other example that comes to mind is Evie Corrigan. Went down to the 52 kilo class. I was about to say incredibly slim, which is not true, but relatively slim for a powerlifter. 52 kilo class, I think around 157 centimeters, 155 centimeters tall. So much taller than a lot of other lifters in that class. And again, previously was in a higher weight class, went down a weight class and was more competitive. So again, contrary to popular belief. And so I guess my main message to start this discussion is that I question the validity of the contention that being heavier at your own height, because obviously you can't change your height, but that being heavier will make you more competitive. And it might be true in a general sense, but there are definitely examples of individuals who have become more competitive by going down a weight class. And so it's immediately unclear to me which way your body weight should go if you want to be as competitive as possible. That's the first thing. Let's, however, assume that being heavier will make you more competitive. Let's assume that putting on weight and filling out a weight class, for example, is a good idea. It's important to consider, though, that there are other ramifications. Firstly, I should say, and I should have said this at the start, but the best weight class to compete in is the one that you're already in. That's probably my first bit of advice. Whatever you weigh, that is the weight class that you are in. That's the best one to compete in. That's my number one bit of advice, and I should have said that 4 minutes ago. You do not need to concern yourself with your body weight. 95% of the time, you can just compete at what you weigh and you'll have a great experience, and you don't have enough to worry about in terms of your training and in terms of your recovery and in terms of your technique, that you're shifting your body weight or manipulating your body weight is just like such a small component of that. So whether you are a newbie to the sport or whether you've been lifting for a long time, I would say whatever you weigh is the weight class to compete in. That aside, let's assume that, yeah, putting on weight will make you heavier. Whatever you weigh now, going up a weight class would be a good idea, assuming that you're not carrying excessive body weight and that you are under muscled. The direction or the perspective that I want to share today is the crux of this whole podcast project of mine, which is practical powerlifting. And that is having a practical and pragmatic view of training and lifting. Many people don't appreciate that your body weight affects more than just your powerlifting. Your body weight affects your entire life, and powerlifting is only a part of your life. Powerlifting may only take up 5, 10, or 20% of your resources, time, energy, dedication, life projects, whatever. But you have a full-time job, potentially, or studies. You have a family. You have other activities and hobbies that you like to do. You are so much more than just powerlifting. And so to decide your body weight purely on the basis of what weight class will make you most competitive, I think is a very shallow, short-sighted, and naive approach. Of course, if you looked at powerlifting and how your body weight affects your powerlifting in a vacuum, in an isolated way, and if we assumed, as I said prior, that going up in body weight will make you more competitive, then that clearly is the best approach, right? Someone like my size at 74 kilos, I should go up to 83. That would make me more competitive. But as I've just explained, it is not that simple. Your body weight affects so much of your life, and it is up to you, and it is only you who can decide where you draw the line, where the boundaries are, what trade-offs are worthwhile for you, and where your priorities lie. So I've got a couple of examples here for things of how your body weight affects your life. The first is your general health. I think that's the most obvious. Bigger people or being heavier will put more strain on your body in a systemic way. And I don't think that's so controversial to say. It puts more strain on your heart. It puts more strain on your visceral system, so your organs. It puts more strain on your joints in your day-to-day. I'll share an example. It was 2016. I competed at the IPF World Championships in Texas, USA. And shortly afterwards, I went on a holiday with my friend Brett. Some of you may remember Brett Gibbs, fantastic powerlifter, and Canadian powerlifter Kelly Branton joined us for a short period of time. And if you don't know Kelly, he was a very successful IPF powerlifter. Later, received a 4-year suspension from the IPF, which I won't go into. And I mean, I don't know much detail about it, to be honest. But he was a super heavyweight powerlifter. He was 160 kilos, 165 kilos. He was competing with Ray Williams. He was from Canada. Very, very competitive, but very, very large, obviously. And so we're at a resort, and we were in the pool, I forget, we were hanging out, whatever. It was getting towards the afternoon, and then we said, okay, how about we break up, go have a shower, have a bit of a rest, and then meet up for dinner again in like an hour and a half from now. And the resort was big. And he was like, no, I'm not doing that. Because his room was on the other side of the resort, about 1 kilometer or maybe 800 meters. So it's at half a mile, nearly 3/4 of a mile in one direction, 2/3 of a mile. And having to walk all the way back to his resort and then walk all the way back to basically where we already was more effort than it was worth. It would have been, he's like, I will have a shower and then I'll just sweat anyway. I'll be disgusting. I'll be exhausted. I just can't do that. That really struck me. I mean, it's been 10 years since this conversation, and it's still with me. And in further conversations I had with him, he said, this is like so unhealthy to be this big, but I will be this big for as long as I need to in order to be as competitive as I can be. One day win an IPF World Championships potentially. And if I do so, I will go down a weight class, or I will lose all the weight and get healthy again. He knew that this was unsustainable. He knew that this was not a healthy lifestyle, but it was a competitive lifestyle. And he chose competition. He chose competitiveness over his own health in more ways than one, it seems like. It may be worth it when the reward is so high. Winning a world championship, having that legacy, having that title, potentially sponsors, whatever it might be. But for you, dear viewer, the benefits of that being more competitive, again, assuming that you will be more competitive if you are heavier, the benefits of being more competitive, is that really worth the downsides in your physical health and the flow and effect of that into your mental health and whatnot? I question if that's the case. And of course, we're not talking about you necessarily being a super heavyweight powerlifter, but that spectrum exists, even across 10% changes in your body weight. After numerous years of competing in the 74 kilo category, I found myself competing in the 77 kilo category when the weight class changed as the federations changed in Australia. And then we went to USAPL Australia and I found myself in the 82.5 kilo category. And so the creep upwards happened relatively slow. And all wisdom said that I would be more competitive at 82.5. And I was pretty good. I was a pretty good lifter at 82.5. I felt good. I was strong. But I didn't like it. I just didn't like being that big. And so I personally came to the realization one day that I don't want to be this big, even if there is some amorphous benefit or some unmeasurable benefit to being bigger. I don't want to. And if I'm less competitive, if I lose the weight going down a weight class, as we return to the IPF, or as I return to the IPF, then so be it. And so personally, I made the choice to go down to the 74 kilo class after lifting at 82.5 for a couple of years because of this reason and many reasons that I'm about to share. And so this first reason, I suppose, is health. It just takes such a toll on your body. Being heavier benefits you in powerlifting, but you only powerlift 10 hours a week. And so it has a drawback that other 158 hours per week. And so that is a consideration that you need to think about. Now, before I go on, I do want to make a quick comment about body weight in general. And it can be a very difficult thing for people to approach. Of course, everyone has their own body weight journey and their own relationship with food and their own relationship with their own body and body image and whatnot. And so I understand that this can be a delicate topic for some people, and perhaps I should have caveated all of this at the start of the episode. But please keep in mind that I am talking about this from a very objective, measurable point of view. If you are someone that is able to control your body weight with relative ease or with relative control, I understand some people may not be able to do so as easily. So yeah, I'm not speaking from that perspective. I'm speaking from the perspective of you are in control of your body weight, and it is your choice to go up or to go down. And yeah, I appreciate that not everyone can. Being bigger also affects how you move through the world, the space that you take up, the clothes that you wear, your confidence, potentially not, your self-image. I know that was also something that I found, and I'm not the kind of person who's particularly sensitive to body image issues or anything like that. I don't find that something that it's not something I struggle with particularly or ever have, but it was definitely noticeable. I could definitely feel, I was like, man, I did not feel so great in my own skin. And it would be irresponsible to pretend that was not the case. It would be irresponsible to pretend oh no, if you are a competitive lifter, then that should be all that matters. It's no, it's maybe it sounds a bit vain, but it's I didn't want to be big. I didn't want to be carrying extra body weight or extra fat that it was unnecessary. Clothes don't fit as well. You don't feel as confident, without a shirt or at the beach, for example. There's also broader effects. For example, what I found when I put on weight was a lot of my old clothes didn't fit, so I had to buy new clothes. That's expensive. That's not easy to do. If you have to get a whole new wardrobe because you've moved up a weight class, that's an expense that you need to consider. Speaking about expenses, there are other expenses. Putting on weight can be expensive because you have to eat more. And again, let's keep in mind that might not be accessible for everybody. To eat all the weight that it requires to put on the weight, and then you'll have a higher basal metabolic rate. So your general eating will just have to be higher. means you'll have to be eating more all the time, which means your expenses will be high. So like this is also a consideration. Things like, being physically larger, things like, I mentioned moving through the world. I'm talking about like public transport, getting on trains or airplanes. Seats become more uncomfortable. These are considerations that I think like people just don't look at, I suppose, or maybe don't appreciate. And so I guess my broadest, like the breadth of my message here is you do need to take into consideration how your body weight will affect you in the world and the space that you kind of take up. Another effect, of course, is on your general fitness. Now, in a very technical sense, being heavier doesn't actually affect your fitness, like the strength of your heart and the strength of your lungs doesn't get affected by body weight, but it does put more pressure on your heart and lungs and your aerobic systems to provide enough energy for your body. So let's assume that that's the case, or let's just interpret it that way. If you are less fit, then suddenly, kind of like my story about Kelly Benton not wanting to walk across a resort, of course, that's an extreme example, but that same principle gets applied in a scaled down version to whatever is appropriate for you. So, for example, maybe walking becomes harder. Maybe cycling becomes harder. Swimming becomes harder. Playing sports that you otherwise would like to enjoy becomes more difficult or becomes less accessible. Walking upstairs becomes less accessible. Maybe you get to a football stadium and you've got to walk up so many stairs or so many ramps, and that just becomes harder. And of course, the mild inconvenience of having to walk upstairs when you weigh 8 kilos more shouldn't really be like such a potent influence that it's going to completely shape the way that you decide or where you're going to place your body weight. But it's the culmination of all these things, right? It's the culmination of being less fit, needing to eat more food, having to get a new set of clothes, feeling less confident potentially, the effects on your health, the effects on your longevity and your health, I suppose. All of these things in a cumulative way can definitely affect your life. And I think that's the message that I'm trying to send here. And so when it comes to thinking about your body weight, it's very important that you think about how will changing in your body weight affect your day-to-day life? How will it affect the way that you live, the quality of your life, the other things that are important to you, and the other things in your life where your weight will have an effect? Now, of course, the same can be said in reverse, right? Losing weight will also affect things. If you decide to go down a weight class, that's also going to affect things. But the sad reality, I suppose, is that majority of things in life, depending on where your body weight is already, obviously, and I'm not talking about someone who's severely underweight, but assuming that you are, of modest body weight or even a little bit overweight, the reality of the world that we live in is that being slightly slimmer does make things easier in many ways. And that's not to romanticize being slimmer. That's not to put it on any pedestal. Again, I'm trying to speak from a very objective way. But if you are a relatively heavy-set powerlifter, for example, and you go down a weight class, generally things will get better. And I struggle to actually think of many cases where being smaller or losing even a small amount of weight, like I did going down a weight class from 83 to 74, I actually really struggle to think of examples where that will actually have a negative impact. Like I'm not quite sure in what way being slimmer actually has drawbacks. I guess you could make a case for consciously bringing your weight down requires effort, requires sacrifices. It's going to require you to make changes to your diet, potentially sacrifices in terms of social ways. Especially if it requires a large amount of effort and a large amount of change in your routines and your in your lifestyle, of course. Making social sacrifices, that kind of thing. But in terms of the broader effect of just simply being smaller, I find it hard to see that there are many. And so if you are a powerlifter, you are also a human being living in the world. And so choosing your body weight based purely on its effect on your powerlifting performance, I will repeat, I feel is a naive, short-sighted thing to do. And it is very important that you try to zoom out and you try to look at the effect of your body weight on your entire life. Weigh up all the pros and cons. Try to foresee some of the issues that may arise if you put on weight or lose weight. Try to foresee some of the benefits if you put on weight or lose weight, and try to balance those things against the potential benefit of those changes in your body weight in your powerlifting. Because like I said at the very start of all of this, I'm not convinced that going up a weight class makes you more competitive. And in fact, across the years, I've come to a very loose conclusion. And by loose conclusion, I mean I am very easily swayed because I have my own biases, that potentially being in a more modest weight class, again, not under muscled. If you, again, this is, I fear people will take this out of context. If you are a 19-year-old 66 kilo lifter that's 175 centimeters tall, you should be going up a weight class. Like, if you, just in general, you will go up a weight class. It's unavoidable if you keep training. But again, I'm talking about someone who has been lifting or is of a very healthy body weight for the sake of this conversation. I find it hard to see how, or I'm just not convinced that going up a weight class is the most competitive thing to do. And that assumes that being competitive is like your number one priority. Again, how important is being competitive as a powerlifter? How important is that relative to being healthy or having your clothes fit well or feeling confident in your day-to-day life or whatever other kind of factors, you know, like ones I've listed or potentially ones I haven't? How important is that idea of being competitive? And you just have to weigh those things up. Okay, that's it for today's episode. Let me know what you think. Shoot me a DM or leave a comment or wherever you're listening to this on. Add to the discussion because I'll be curious to hear what other people think. Again, I don't want anyone taking this out of context and putting my words in situations that don't kind of like make sense. But I think it is an important discussion and one that I'd be happy to have with you. All right, thanks a lot.